Have you ever wondered why a man forgets every woman who made herself available, but remembers forever the one who vanished in silence? It begins in the unconscious. When a woman ceases to perform and instead embodies, when she no longer moves from approval seeking but from stillness, something ancient awakens in the male psyche. He no longer sees her as just a woman. She becomes an enigma, a temple, a mirror of his own unlived soul. Carl Jung spoke of the anima, the inner feminine that resides within every man. But most men are not conscious of this feminine force. They project it onto the women they desire, needing them to be what they have not yet faced in themselves. And the woman who is rooted in her own center, who does not bend to fill the voids in others, that woman becomes the canvas for his most powerful projection. She becomes sacred, not because she asked to be, not because she crafted it, but because she remained unknowable. The feminine mystery is not about withholding affection or playing games. It is about depth. The depth of a woman who has gone through her own dark night, who has sat beside her shadow and made peace with it. She does not need to be chased. She doesn't need to explain. Her energy speaks before her words ever do. It unsettles the superficial man and haunts the man capable of depth. This is what Jung meant when he warned that what you do not make conscious will rule your life, and you will call it fate. A man will call a mysterious woman his fate because he cannot explain why he's drawn to her. It's not logic. It's not her looks. It's not even compatibility. It's archetypal. It's the divine feminine clothed in silence, a still flame that does not flicker for approval. And here's the paradox. While she becomes the object of his deepest longing, she is not for him. She is not performing to be seen. She has become. This is where women misunderstand power. Many seek to seduce by revealing more skin, more vulnerability, more access. But mystery isn't built on how much you offer. It's forged in what you withhold, not out of fear, not out of manipulation, but because you are full. Your worth no longer depends on being chosen. He is not addicted to what he can have. He becomes spiritually bound to what he can't possess. When a man meets a woman who knows how to walk away, not out of pride, but out of sacred self-worth, he is left with an echo, an ache, something he cannot fix, label, or replace. That echo will call him back in dreams, in the quiet moments, in the relationships that don't touch the same place. She becomes the symbol of what he cannot conquer, the part of himself he has yet to integrate. Most women were taught to make themselves lovable. Smile, soften, apologize for intensity. But the woman who awakens the deepest parts of a man does not shrink. She doesn't smile to ease his discomfort. She doesn't contort to be chosen. She stands as she is. And this standing, this rootedness in self, is what makes her a cathedral to him. Something spiritual, something beyond comprehension, something that breaks him open. There is danger in her presence, not because she threatens, but because she reveals. She reflects the emptiness he carries. She stirs the questions he's avoided. She becomes the living embodiment of what Jung called the numinous, the presence of the divine encountered in human form. But be warned, not every man is ready for that revelation. Many will try to cage her mystery, to name it, tame it, decode it, but what cannot be owned becomes revered. This is the feminine that does not beg for attention. It is the feminine that commands reverence. And if you are her, if you are becoming her, you already know the solitude that comes with it. Not many will understand you. Your silence will be misread, your detachment misjudged. But beneath it all, you are creating the space in which something holy can take shape. You are not meant to be understood by the world. You are meant to be remembered by the few who see beyond the veil. He will not remember the woman who chased him. He will forget the one who needed him to choose her. But he will carry the woman he could never figure out because she was never a puzzle to solve. She was a mirror of his soul's unfinished work. She did not speak to his ears. She whispered to his unconscious. And that is where religion begins. And so it continues, not as a love story in the way the world tells it, but as a sacred drama unfolding within the soul of a man. When he meets a woman who is mystery incarnate, his rational mind is disturbed. His ego, trained to dominate, to define, begins to tremble. For in her stillness, he sees everything he cannot name. She is not offering herself for consumption. She is withholding nothing, and yet remains utterly unreachable. This isn't about games. This is psyche and soul. Carl Jung wrote that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But the transformation does not begin with touch. It begins with longing, with projection, with the mystery of what cannot be immediately known. The woman who lives in alignment with her inner world does not demand recognition. She becomes the catalyst for a man's spiritual reckoning. When she enters his orbit, his unconscious begins to stir. She does not have to say much. Her energy speaks in ancient tongues, reminding him of something he once knew in dreams, or perhaps never allowed himself to feel. She represents what he is not, and at the same time, everything he needs to become whole. He becomes obsessed, not with her, but with what she reflects. And she? She remains the mirror, refusing to distort her shape to make his reflection easier to bear. Most men are not ready for such truth. They were raised to believe that women are roles to fill: mother, lover, caretaker, muse. But the woman who has met her shadow, who has died to ego and returned to herself, no longer fits any of these molds. She is not here to soothe his insecurity. She is not interested in being understood. Her presence is a disruption, a necessary one. In her, he feels his own inadequacy, but not because she humiliates him, because she exposes the emptiness beneath his image. He wants to capture her, but how does one hold the wind? How does one label the divine? He may try to dominate her, reduce her mystery to biology, blame her silence on coldness. He may say she is too much, or worse, too little. But none of it lands. She has transcended those games. Her power is no longer tied to validation. She doesn't provoke, she radiates. This is the woman who lives by inner law, who has stared at the hunger in a man's eyes and dared not to feed it. Not because she is cruel, but because she is no longer responsible for healing what he refuses to face. She becomes a sacred interruption to his illusion, and he may resent her for it, but he will never forget her. Jung called this the numinous experience, the kind that pierces the veil of daily life and opens the psyche to something far greater. In this woman, the man does not find a girlfriend. He finds a mystery, a myth, a force. And though he may not understand it, he will feel it in his bones. He will measure every woman after her, and none will fit, because she did not play a role. She embodied an archetype. She showed him what it means to feel without ownership, to desire without knowing why, to ache without hope of resolution. And that ache, that is the beginning of transformation, but only if he chooses to go inward. Only if he stops blaming her for what she awakened. Only if he begins to explore the vast, unmapped terrain of his own soul. Some men will walk away, confused, bruised, pride wounded. Others will descend into themselves, into shadow, into silence, seeking the origin of this unbearable yearning. And there at the bottom, they might begin to realize it was never about her. It was about him, his disowned feminine, his projected needs, his unmet wounds. The goddess before him only lit the match. The fire was always his. And she walks away unburned, not because she doesn't feel, but because she knows the flame of projection cannot consume what is real. She was not a fantasy, she was a mirror, and now his only choice is whether he will smash it or see himself in it. And if he dares to see, really see, then the mirror becomes a portal, a passage into the deepest recesses of his soul where the anima waits, dormant, unformed, twisting beneath years of ego armor, buried beneath conquest, bravado, and emotional silence. She, the inner feminine, has always been there, unseen and unmet. But in encountering a woman who embodies that mystery instead of performing it, he is forced to confront her reflection within himself. This is the moment Jung described, when a man meets the image of the soul and, if he is brave, begins the terrifying work of individuation. It is terrifying because it demands sacrifice. He must lose his illusions of control, of superiority, of entitlement. He must dismantle the scaffolding that holds his fragile identity together. The man who once sought to conquer now must surrender, not to the woman, but to the self he has long exiled, the feminine within. The silent force of intuition, vulnerability, and emotional truth he was taught to reject. And she, the living mystery, she does not wait for him to arrive. She continues on her own path. She does not slow down for the man who is confused. She does not kneel to help him find his footing. That is not her role. She has already walked the fire. Her womb has already buried old versions of herself. She no longer saves men who are afraid to bleed. She walks with elegance through silence, letting the world mislabel her as cold, distant, arrogant, when in truth, she is simply done performing smallness. For the woman who becomes a man's religion is not worshipped through flowers and gifts. She is worshipped through transformation. The man who sees her fully must change. There is no other option. And this is why she becomes unforgettable. Not because of seduction, not because of games, but because she marks a threshold. She is the threshold. The moment he met her, he crossed into unfamiliar territory. She was not like the others. She did not affirm his ego. She did not beg to be seen. She became a mirror of everything he lacked. And in that mirror, he either awakens or collapses. Some men collapse. They retreat into safer illusions, into women who flatter their identity instead of shattering it, into relationships where their control goes unchallenged, where the mystery is shallow and the emotional terrain is paved, predictable, lifeless. But others, rare men, stay in the silence, in the confusion, in the unbearable grief of losing what they could not hold. And that grief becomes sacred, because through it, something begins to break open. The mask falls. The boy pretending to be a man is confronted by the ghost of every emotion he buried. He starts to feel, to need, to ache without resolution. This is the holy wound. And the woman who caused it, without intention, without cruelty, was simply herself. She did not twist. She did not contort. She simply refused to be owned. He will remember the curve of her silence more than the sound of her voice. The way she didn't reach for him when he pulled away. The way her absence carved its own presence inside him. She did not punish him. She didn't need to. Her mystery was the punishment. For in her mystery, he met his own emptiness. And it was vast. That is why she becomes a man's religion. Not because he believes in her, but because he needs her to understand himself. She becomes the symbolic figure of what he cannot reach, the eternal anima he must reclaim through inner work. His prayers to her are whispered not at altars, but in restless thoughts, dreams that sting, memories that don't fade. And if he is wise, he will stop asking for her return and begin returning to himself. Because the truth is, he was never chasing her. He was chasing the parts of himself she awakened. She was the doorway, but he must walk through it alone. The further he walks into himself, the more he begins to understand. It was never about possession. It was about reflection. She was the still lake, and he saw his distorted face upon her surface. But where once he demanded the waters bend, he now kneels, humbled by what they reveal. The anima, the feminine within, no longer feels foreign. Her voice is quieter than desire. She does not seduce with fantasy, but with truth. She does not beg for love. She remembers it. And when a man begins to hear this voice within himself, he changes, not for her, but because he can no longer not change. He softens, not in weakness, but in courage. The shadow he once projected onto her, the rage, the blame, the fear, now calls from inside. And instead of casting it outward, he turns toward it. He sits with it. This is shadow work, the descent, the slow undoing of a man who no longer wants to live as a mask. It's in this state that reverence is born. Not the reverence of worshiping a woman, but the reverence of seeing, truly seeing the sacred in her being, not as an object of desire, but as a force of transformation. She never needed his validation. She was never waiting for his arrival. Her path continued, and she became even more herself. While he wandered the halls of his psyche, trying to decode the mystery she carried so effortlessly, she was deepening her own, not to elude him, but because the mystery was never for him. It was hers. And now, finally, he begins to accept that. He doesn't need to possess her to be changed by her. He doesn't need to understand her to be humbled by her. This is the sacred feminine, untamable, elusive, and real. It lives in every woman who has chosen herself over performance. Every woman who has faced her own abandonment and chosen to stay, not with him, but with herself. Every woman who has burned through the ache of being misunderstood and emerged quieter, wilder, and more whole. She does not explain. She does not chase. She simply is. And to the man who is still bound by the ego, this being is maddening. He cannot grasp it. He cannot predict it. And so, he may label her dangerous, manipulative, aloof. But his anger is not about her. It is about what he cannot own within himself. She is the symbol of everything he repressed, the emotion he numbed, the chaos he feared, the beauty he never thought he deserved. And even when she is gone, even when her footsteps have long vanished from his life, her essence lingers. Not like a wound, like a whisper, a sacred echo in his soul that says, return to yourself. And perhaps he does, slowly, through grief, through rage, through humility, until the woman is no longer a haunting memory, but a sacred symbol of his own rebirth. This is the religion she unknowingly becomes, not devotion to her, but devotion to awakening, to depth, to truth. She is not the god. She is the flame on the altar, the smoke that rises after the sacrifice, the vision that follows the fast. He will tell no one about her, not truly. He may speak of her name, her hair, her habits, but her mystery, that part he will guard. Because to speak it out loud would dissolve it. Some women live forever in silence, not because they were forgotten, but because they can't be described. She didn't just make him feel something. She made him remember something. A life before the masks, a love that needed no return. And perhaps one day, he meets another woman. She is kind, she is stable, she is open, but she is not the same. And that's okay, because the woman who became his religion was never meant to stay. She was the threshold, the ache that cracked him open, the ghost that kissed his soul awake. She did not need him to choose her. She only needed to remain true to herself. And now, through her absence, he begins to choose himself. Not the image, not the armor, the truth. There are things a man only learns after loss. Not the loud, obvious kind of loss, but the quiet one. The loss of a woman who was never his to begin with, who gave no ultimatums, who issued no threats, who simply stopped showing up. Not because she hated him, but because she could no longer shrink into spaces she had outgrown. She left like a whisper, yet left the silence full. And in that silence, he begins to feel things he'd never allowed himself to feel before. The ache that used to be buried beneath distractions begins to speak. The part of him that longed for her attention now begins to turn inward, slowly, painfully, honestly. This is the part Jung spoke of, the confrontation with the self, not the persona, not the man he thought he was, but the man that waits beneath the noise, the roles, the chasing, the man who is capable of becoming whole, but he cannot return to who he was before her. That version of him no longer fits. Not after the sacred wound, not after being touched by someone who did not need to do anything to change him. She changed him by being untouchable. She never fed his ego. She fed his emptiness, not by filling it, but by refusing to. And that refusal, that divine refusal, is what echoes in his bones. It is not rejection. It is invitation, a haunting one, an intimate one, an invitation to rise beyond needing to be chosen, to rise beyond chasing a woman to avoid meeting the woman within, to rise into the full responsibility of his emotional world, no longer seeking a mother to tend it, but becoming the man who can hold his own soul in both hands. Because that's what her mystery demanded, not submission, but sovereignty. She was not asking to be worshipped. She was asking him to see, and not see her, truly, not her softness, not her beauty, not her wit, but to see through her, to recognize what she activated in him, to stop projecting the divine and start embodying it. This is the pain and poetry of meeting a woman who is already whole. She does not come to complete you. She comes to remind you that you were always meant to complete yourself. She is not the end of your journey. She is the sacred detour that breaks the cycle. The woman who becomes a man's religion is not always the one he ends up with. She is often the one he wasn't ready for. The one whose silence taught more than another woman's love. The one whose absence rang louder than someone else's presence. He may live his life, build, succeed, love again. But there will be moments, quiet, uninvited moments, where her memory returns like a distant storm. Not because he regrets, but because she marked the dividing line between who he was and who he became. He may never understand her. That's not the point. She wasn't meant to be understood. She was meant to be felt. And what he felt was the stirrings of his own forgotten self. So to the woman who feels unseen, too quiet, too deep, to the one who walks away not in anger, but in self-honor, understand this. He will forget the ones who gave themselves too soon. But he will remember you. He will remember the way your eyes held questions instead of answers, the way your presence made him feel something ancient and unnameable, the way your silence carved a cathedral in his memory, because you were not entertainment, you were a revelation. And now, even in your absence, he is learning to kneel, not before you, but before what you represented. He begins to pray differently, not for you to return, but for the strength to carry what you left behind, a new standard, a new hunger, a new self. He doesn't chase the mystery anymore. He protects it within himself. Because once a man has seen the divine, even for a moment, he cannot go back to worshiping what is hollow. And you, woman of mystery, you did not wait for him to see it. You left when it was time to go. You trusted the ache would do what presence never could. And it did. It is. It always will. And now, as the journey nears its end, something ancient begins to settle. There is no grand reunion, no romantic crescendo, just a quiet truth resting in the space between two lives forever altered by an invisible current. She, the woman who walked away, cloaked in her own knowing, never looked back. Not because she didn't care, but because she did not need to be seen to exist. Her power was never transactional. It was elemental. And he, who once grasped and begged the mystery to unfold, no longer demands answers. He has learned that not all truths arrive with words. Some arrive as a slow burn in the chest, a shift in how he sees the world, a silence he finally welcomes because within it he meets himself. This is the alchemy. The woman was never a destination. She was the catalyst, the tremor, the myth that broke him open. She turned his gaze inward without ever touching his skin. She undid years of bravado with a single glance. She mirrored his chaos with calm, his noise with stillness, his need with indifference, not to punish, but to reflect. And reflection, when one is brave enough to bear it, changes everything. For her, there is no gloating, no sense of conquest, only the soft, holy grief that comes from letting go of someone who wasn't ready. She does not carry his name in her prayers. She does not ask the universe to bring him back. She trusts that everything unsaid has already done its work, that her absence taught him more than her presence ever could. She continues her path as women of depth always do, through cycles of becoming, through death and rebirth, through landscapes that require solitude. Her mystery deepens, not for display, but for devotion. Devotion to the self, devotion to the divine within. She has nothing left to prove, because the woman who becomes a man's religion is not seeking worship. She is living in truth. And he? He now walks differently. He speaks less. He listens more. He notices things he used to ignore. The curve of the moon, the sound of leaves, the ache that rises without reason when he thinks of her. He does not speak her name often, but he carries her like a sacred scar, a beautiful ache he would never wish away. He has begun the work, no longer projecting, no longer chasing, no longer looking for the divine in others, but finding it within, slowly, brutally, honestly. She is not forgotten. She is woven into the very way he breathes, and yet he has released her. This is the completion. This is individuation. The feminine mystery does not exist to decorate a man's life. It exists to awaken his soul. And when a woman embodies that mystery, when she refuses to be reduced, tamed, or defined, she becomes more than memory. She becomes myth. Not because of what she gave, but because of what she withheld. She withheld herself until she was met in truth. And when she wasn't, she left. Not with bitterness, not with tears, with grace. That is the feminine power few understand. The ability to let go before being understood. The courage to become your own sanctuary. The wisdom to know that absence, when rooted in self-worth, can be the most powerful form of presence. So when he remembers her, and he will not remember the softness of her skin first. He will not remember the way she laughed or the way her voice curved around his name. He will remember how she made him feel. Not comforted, not safe, awake. And in that awakening, everything changed. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.